I was excited to get y'all this top 24 running back list. Then we got Jonathan Taylor news. We got Dalvin Cook news. So I had to push this back a bit. We're going to have to go through and update this list now. And regardless, I'll be excited to get y'all the new top 24 running backs, starting with Christian McCaffrey at 1. Obviously, nothing changing here. With CMC, I'll reiterate, no, he's not the same running back he was in 2019 where he averaged 150 yards per game. No, I don't think you should take him number 1 overall in fantasy. Now, yes, he's my running back 1 because he still has a crazy ceiling. He's still a phenomenal passing down back, as well as he will have touchdown upside in a good 49ers offense. But full transparency, the red flags are going to come with his usage with and without Elijah Mitchell, where in games with Elijah Mitchell, Christian McCaffrey this past year averaged 10.5 carries per contest. In games without Elijah Mitchell, he averaged 15.5 carries per contest. You're definitely seeing a split in the usage there, and you're also a little bit worried about his age. Generally, we're trying to get running backs that are 26 years old or younger. Now, Christian McCaffrey drafted back in 2017. You would assume that he's super old. Well, he's not that old, right? I mean, the man just turned 27. So I do want to at least address the fact that it is a red flag. And no, I don't think you should take him ahead of Justin Jefferson. But still, based off the ceiling that you have, he has to be your running back 1. I mean, hell, he won us the big dog tournament for $100,000 on Underdog last season. So you know I'm rooting for my guy. Now, going over to 2, we're going to have Austin Ekeler, who is actually the number 1 overall flex option in fantasy drafts last season. And I'm here to tell you, it's not going to happen again. Okay, you still should be pretty damn excited about Austin Ekeler in a full PPR format, given the fact that over the past 3 years, he's averaged about 6.5 targets per game. His elite level quarterback play with Justin Herbert should be a great offense overall. But similar to the concerns that you have with Christian McCaffrey, you are going to have to be a little bit worried about Austin Ekeler when it comes to his age. With Austin Ekeler, this was a running back that was also in that 2017 draft class, but he actually stayed all 4 years in school, so he's not 27. Instead, he turned 28 back in May. And historically speaking, this is about when you have to be worried about running backs. I mean, if we go through and look at the RotoViz screener since the year 2000 and look at running backs that at the age 27 had the same type of season that we saw from Austin Ekeler this past year, you had Curtis Martin back in the year 2000, and from the year 2000 to the year 2001, the man slightly declined in points per game, not a big drop, from about 19 to 18.8. But then after that, you had David Johnson in 2018 to 2019, going from about 16 points per game down to 12. You had Deuce Staley going from 16 points per game down to 10. You had Lamont Jordan going from 21 points per game down to 8. You had Liddell Betts going from 15 points per game down to 5. And you had Austin Ekeler and Leonard Fournette this past season. We don't know how that's going to play out just yet. So I do want to at least bring this up and say it is a concern. That's why I'm not going to be putting him here at number 1 overall. And you also need to look at the splits that you have with and without Keenan Allen and with and without Mike Williams. In games where Keenan Allen played this past season, Austin Ekeler actually only averaged 6.2 targets per game. In games without Keenan Allen, he was up there at 9.3. And you can see a similar thing with Mike Williams. In games with Mike Williams this past year, he was at 6.5. In games without Mike Williams this past season, he was at 10.5 targets per game. So now that you add in Quentin Johnston, that's going to be another capable passing option for Justin Herbert. And I think you should see the involvement as a pass catcher go down ever so slightly for Austin Ekeler. But still, he's great. He's a running back 2 overall. Now our next guy, Bijan Robinson. Hook 'em Horns, interviewed him at the draft. I'm a former Texas Longhorn. I ran into him at the gym a couple weeks back. This is someone that I want to root for. Now, the most exciting thing about Bijan Robinson is not that he's going to a team that wants to lead the NFL in carries. We've seen that Arthur Smith wants to go out there and have 400 rushing attempts in a single season for his top back. I mean, last year they were number 2 in the NFL in rushing attempts with Cordell Patterson and Tyler Algier as their top guys. But it's also the fact that this is a phenomenal receiving down running back. I talked about this, that back in this final season at Texas, the man had over 300 receiving yards off of 19 receptions. The man averaged 16.5 yards per reception. He runs real routes. It's not like he's just getting dump offs out of the backfield. Hell, we even see in this clip that he's going out there and he's running real routes and making moves in training camp. Love the man. I mean, hell, we've seen running backs time and time again be running back ones in fantasy. I expect nothing different from Bijan Robinson. He's the best running back prospect we've seen since Saquon Barkley. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to be looking at a Mr. Saquon Barkley, my most drafted running back in fantasy this year, and that's because in all these underdog drafts, we were getting Saquon Barkley at the end of the second round, the middle part of the second round, and I mean, I'm sorry. I can't be the guy drafting Jalen Waddle. I can't be the guy drafting Chris Olave over Barkley. I'm going to take Barkley there any day of the week, so we've loaded up on him. He goes through, he officially signs, he's playing this next season. Last year, he hits the thresholds we're looking for from a market share perspective of both a rusher as well as a pass catcher. He had a target share up there at 15% this past season. He was the running back 5 in fantasy this past year as well. So yeah, I'm all in on Saquon Barkley. I've drafted him like 20% of my underdog drafts so far. If you're looking at the player props that they have right now with Saquon Barkley, they have Barkley at 7.5 rushing touchdowns, almost 1,000 rushing yards. And yes, I'm honestly kind of fine with those lines. Now, going over to our next guy, this is one of my favorite lines on the Underdog, is for a Mr. Nick Chubb. Now, my favorite line isn't going to be these straight up numbers when it comes to Nick Chubb, where they have Chubb sitting at half a receiving touchdown, 9 rushing touchdowns, 1,200 receiving yards. What I would rather look at is the Rivals line that they have Nick Chubb plus half a rushing touchdown versus Josh Jacobs. That's what I'm going to be most excited about when it comes to these player props with Nick Chubb. It's a running back that for 3 straight seasons now has had over 100 total yards per game. It's a running back that should see an expanded role with no Kareem Hunt in this offense. Now, of course, I'm not expecting that Nick Chubb goes out there and takes every single touch that Kareem Hunt had. But what I do think is he probably takes half of those touches. Jerome Ford takes the other half if this is a team that doesn't bring in another running back. So yeah, I think you'd be pretty damn excited about Chubb here. And of course, if y'all want to check out any of those player props, or if you want to get into a draft with us on Underdog Fantasy, we are drafting literally every single day on the live stream. We've almost streamed for 100 days in a row at this point. You can find the link to Underdog in the live chat description or comment section. It's best ball, so no time commitment at all during the year. That's how I drafted 700 teams and won $150,000 last season. And if you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you'll get my 2023 fantasy football rankings and a free trial to flockfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK. My other favorite player props that they have right now, Jamar Chase plus 25 receiving yards versus Devontae Adams, Trevor Lawrence plus 50 passing yards versus Dak Prescott, Amon-Ra St. Brown minus half a receiving touchdown against Pat Freiermuth, and CeeDee Lamb minus half a receiving touchdown against Gabe Davis. Now, our next guy is someone that I've also drafted a lot of. Jonathan Taylor has requested a trade from the Indianapolis Colts. Now, what we are looking at the time of this recording is Ian Rappaport tweeting out, source, Colts star running back Jonathan Taylor has formally requested a trade after meeting with owner Jim Irsay. Then Ian Rappaport tweeted out later that night the response from Albert Breer, text from the Colts owner Jim Irsay on Jonathan Taylor's trade request. We're not trading Jonathan. End of this discussion. Not now and not in October. Obviously, I'm an idiot. I have no idea what the hell's going to happen. Now, what I will say is I don't think Jonathan Taylor has a lot of leverage in this situation, right? But at the same time, I mean, I don't necessarily see the Indianapolis Colts as a contending team this year. And if they're not wanting to sign Jonathan Taylor to a long-term contract, when this is most likely a long-term build with Anthony Richardson, in my mind, maybe it would make sense for them to ship Jonathan Taylor to a contending team. Maybe it would make sense for them to ship him over to the Miami Dolphins, right? Maybe it would make sense to send him over to the Philadelphia Eagles if somehow they could make that work. Or hell, maybe even if it's not a contending team, just a team that's willing to pay a running back, maybe they send him to the Chicago Bears. But regardless, I am going to be moving Jonathan Taylor behind Nick Chubb in these rankings just because of the uncertainty, just because I don't know what's going to happen. Now, Tony Pollard is our next guy. With Pollard, running back 9 this past season, should be super excited if you are a Tony Pollard drafter now that you officially have no Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. Pollard is a running back that can move higher in my rankings, but I am simply waiting until we get closer to the season. If we get to September and the Dallas Cowboys have not brought in Jonathan Taylor, have not brought in Dalvin Cook, have not brought in Kareem Hunt, have not brought in Leonard Fournette, have not brought in Ezekiel Elliott. Tony Pollard at that point would have to move up because on paper, with no Ezekiel Elliott here in Dallas, based off his finish last year, Tony Pollard would look like a league-winning running back in fantasy. I just have a little thing in my gut that makes me worried that this is a team that's going to be bringing in another running back into the mix. Now, our next guy will be Derrick Henry. 3 straight seasons now as a top 5 running back. 3 straight seasons now with over 110 total yards per game. And he's improving as a pass catcher. He had a career high 9.5% team target share this past season in Tennessee. Now, there are 2 big red flags. One, his age, okay? The second one being his offense. Right now, if you look across the board, pretty much any set of rankings you'll look at has the Tennessee Titans ranked as the worst or second to worst offensive line in the entire NFL this season. So that doesn't look great, right? I mean, it does not look great to be playing behind a bad offensive line. Doesn't look great to be playing alongside Ryan Tannehill. And it also doesn't look great to be pushing 30 years old. I mean, if we're going to go ahead and look at running backs that just had a similar type season at age 29 going into their age 30 year as Derrick Henry, you had Arian Foster in 2014. The following season, he only played 4 games. You had LaShawn McCoy in 2016, who fell from about 20 points per game down to about 16.5 points per game. You had Curtis Martin in 2001, going from about 19 points per game down to 15 points per game. You had Marshawn Lynch in 2014 going from 19 points per game down to 12 points per game. You had DeMarco Murray in 2016 going from about 18.5 points per game down to 11.5. So this is a real concern that you need to be looking into. But with that being said, I think if we're ranking Derrick Henry as running back 8, when he's had 3 straight seasons as a top 5 back, we're kind of pricing that in here, right? We are pricing in a little bit of a decline. I would say if you're drafting on Underdog and you're going to get Derrick Henry at the beginning of the 3rd round, I've drafted a lot of Derrick Henry at the beginning of the 3rd in these Underdog drafts. But if you're going to be in like your regular ESPN redraft format and there Derrick Henry has an ADP of 9 and you're going to have to take him in round 1, just don't take him in round 1. You can't do it. Too many red flags. Now, our next guy, Josh Jacobs, was my most drafted player last year. And, I was very happy about that when he goes out there and averages 120 total yards per game. With Jacobs, I assume he plays this next season. I don't see him having a lot of leverage in this situation. I think that the Raiders are going to get him out there on the field. I mean, you can kind of see this by looking at those Underdog player props where right now they still have that lineup where it's Josh Jacobs minus half a rushing touchdown versus Nick Chubb. Now, of course, very bad situation. We don't know how good this offense is going to be, but to be fair to Jacobs last year, the offense was horrendous, and he still averaged 20 carries per game. He still had a target share over 10%. Now, our next guy, Ramondre Stevenson, is very similar to Tony Pollard. If the New England Patriots do not bring in another running back this next season, I can tell you right now, we are going to get crushed, and I repeat, crushed for having Ramondre Stevenson this low. I really haven't been drafting Ramondre at the end of the 2nd round. I really haven't been drafting Ramondre Stevenson at the beginning of the 3rd round. Instead, I've been taking someone like Jalen Hurts. But on paper, if they don't bring in Zeke, if they don't bring in Dalvin, if they don't bring in Fournette, Hunt, JT, or regardless of who it may be, Ramondre Stevenson looks like a league winner this next season. Like I said, very similar to Pollard. I have a little gross feeling in my stomach that I think they may be bringing in another one of those running backs, but it's probably unwarranted, and you should probably ignore me. Now, going over to our next guy, Breece Hall is someone that is incredibly hard to rank right now. He's coming off a torn ACL. This is a running back that, at the end of the day, I think is an elite level talent in a phenomenal offense. But with that being said, Dalvin Cook, at the time of this recording, is right now visiting with the New York Jets. It would not be a surprise at all if Dalvin Cook signs with the Jets. And if that were to happen, and you combine the fact that Breece Hall is coming off a torn ACL, I would imagine we have to move Breece Hall down 6 slots minimum in these rankings. I'd imagine that Breece Hall has to move down to like running back 16. So we have a massive asterisk with this ranking. This will be something we have to continue to monitor and update as we go through. But our next guy will be Travis Etienne. Etienne, running back 24 this past season. he wasn't involved as a pass catcher, which is something that I hated seeing because he was at Clemson, right? But you just had him going out there and talking about the running back contract situations and saying, well, you know what? Yeah, I mean, if you're a running back and you want to get paid, you better develop as a receiving down back. You better have that skill set added on. So what I'm expecting for Travis Etienne this next year, based off his statements in that interview, as well as his usage at the University of Clemson, is I'm expecting that Travis Etienne expands his role as a pass catcher in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. And at the end of the day, this should be a pretty good team with Trevor Lawrence. Now, our next guy is going to be Najee Harris. And with Najee Harris, I want to make excuses for him last year. I want to say the offensive line was bad. He played with Mitchell Trubisky and a rookie year quarterback. Hell, he was dealing with the Liz Frank injury. That's why you saw the significant drop-off. With that being said, we can sit here and we can make excuses for Najee Harris, and I can say that all of that stuff is much better going into this next season, so I am going to be baking in a little bit of a bounce back here, but it's not like we can just completely throw last year at the window, because if we go through and look historically of what we had with running backs in their rookie and second year season that comped to Najee Harris in those performances, you had James Robinson as well as Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the only two backs since the year 2000. And clearly we saw both those guys played out. Now going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at Joe Mixon here. Joe Mixon is a running back that honestly, I want to move higher than this, right? He's not even as old as those guys like Austin Eckler in that 2017 class. He's still in a phenomenal offense. He restructures his contract. So hell, you know what? I'm going to move Joe Mixon up here. Let's move him. I'm going aggressive. Let's move him up to running back 11. Okay. Now this is significantly higher than where you would see Joe Mixon drafted on Underdog Fantasy. Right now, if you're going over and looking at Underdog, they're going to have some crazy low lines with Joe Mixon. Last I checked, they had him at about 800 rushing yards. On top of this, if you are looking at the ADP for Joe Mixon on Underdog Fantasy, there he's the running back 15. There he's going after Drake London. He's going after Terry McLaurin. Right before DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams. It's a running back that had a 15% team target share this past year. This is a running back that was the running back 6 from a points per game perspective. If you look at his historical comps at his age, you really don't see the fall off like you do with those other older running backs. So yeah, I'm going to move Joe Mixon a little bit higher here. We're going to move him all the way up to 11. Now, our next guy, we're going to have Jahmyr Gibbs at 15. With Jahmyr Gibbs, this is a running back that was a phenomenal prospect. This is a running back that demonstrated his receiving down skill set at Georgia Tech to get early on comps to Alvin Kamara, where the man had 465 receiving yards in 12 games as a true sophomore. He then goes to Alabama and he has 44 receptions in 12 games played. He's pretty much Alabama's best weapon in that offense this past season. He runs a 4.36 40-yard dash. He goes pick 12 in the NFL draft. He checks a lot of boxes. He's running behind an elite offensive line. The real concern that you have is he weighs 199 pounds. Historically speaking, you have to go all the way back to like Jamal Charles to find a running back that was that small at the time of the NFL Combine that found elite success in his NFL career. But you can't fade Jahmyr Gibbs just because he's a phenomenal pass catcher. Now, our next guy, Kenneth Walker, is a running back that I've actually drafted a considerable amount, and I think he's a reasonable price point almost no matter where you look. Now, obviously, bringing in Zach Charbonnet is a pretty big deal here. I mean, if you're bringing in Zach Charbonnet, we have to lower expectations for Kenneth Walker in comparison to where he would be with no Zach. But I think that we're fairly doing that because I could say that if the Seattle Seahawks did not draft Zach Charbonnet in round 2 of this year's NFL draft, I probably would have had Kenneth Walker ahead of Gibbs, ahead of Najee, ahead of Etienne, ahead of Hall, ahead of Mixon. I probably would have had him up there like between Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs in these rankings. He was my second most drafted running back last year. That's when we were getting him in the double-digit rounds. Love the guy who's running back 17 from a points per game basis. I mean, he had the elite level breakout after the first month of the season. The only running backs better in fantasy were Eckler, CMC, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, James Conner, Joe Mixon, Barkley, as well as Ramadre. Now, going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at Aaron Jones. A little bit worried about the age when it comes to Aaron Jones. A little bit worried about the overall offense. Obviously, we are pricing in those red flags, and that he's had 3 seasons now as a low-end running back 1 in fantasy, average finish as the running back 10. We're ranking him as the running back 17. I mean, we know who Aaron Jones is, right? The only thing that we can really talk about is Jordan Love. If you are a believer in Jordan Love, you want to move Aaron Jones up, because I've heard some people say, oh no, Mason, come on, Jordan Love's going to be bad. That's great for Aaron Jones. They're going to run the ball over and over and over. No. Don't think that way. What you want if you're drafting Aaron Jones is you want Jordan Love to be good. That way they have sustained drives, they have trips to the red zone, and touchdown opportunity for Aaron Jones. Now, next guy, Miles Sanders. Reports coming out saying it's going to be a 3-down back, and honestly, I kind of believe him. They gave him the contract this past year, giving him $11 million guaranteed at signing. On top of this, if you're looking at Miles Sanders, there's just nobody else here. You're really going to go and give the ball to Chuba Hubbard? In what situation does that make sense? So, I mean, yeah, I don't know what to think of the offense. I don't necessarily think Miles Sanders is some great running back. I think it kind of comes down to the price point in which you are drafting him. Now, if you're going to be looking at ESPN drafts, there he's going to be the running back 20. He's going at the end of round 5. In comparison, if you're looking at underdog drafts, Miles Sanders, the running back 20, going at the beginning of round 6. And if you're going to be looking at player props, they have him at 925 rushing yards this next season. So, I mean, I think it's up to you and what you think of Bryce Young. Now, next guy, we're going to be looking at Damien Pierce. Love me some Damien Pierce. I've talked about this so much, I want to be quiet at this point, but let's just do a quick recap of what's happened over the past 12 months. Last year, Damien Pierce, as a day 3 NFL draft pick that had never played a snap, that was getting training camp buzz, was going in round 4 or 5 of fantasy football drafts when his starting quarterback was Davis Mills. I thought it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I thought I was a genius to fade him and put him on our do not draft list. And he ended up being pretty damn good. He was the running back 21 in one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL, running alongside Davis Mills. They bring in CJ Stroud, who's probably not going to be great year 1, right? But will probably be better than Davis Mills. So I'm thinking, okay, yeah, this running back's proven himself. They get a quarterback upgrade. The offense should be better. They really only bring in Devin Singletary as a backup. What, is he now going to be a 3rd round pick? Is he going to be a 2nd round pick? I'm having to say, no, don't draft Damien Pierce again? Well, no, he's gotten cheaper. Now he's going in round 6. I just drafted him in round 7 the other day of an underdog draft. So I'm all about Damien Pierce at his current price tag. Now, Dobbins is someone that we're going to have to continue to monitor the situation. Now, Dobbins hasn't been practicing, but it hasn't been related to an injury. Instead, with J.K. Dobbins, this has been all about the contract situation and him not wanting to play the final year on his rookie deal. And I got news for you, J.K. Dobbins. I mean, I hate to say this. I hate to be an ass. Of course, I'm just some random scrub. I'm an internet troll. I'm an idiot. I mean nothing. But if Saquon Barkley hadn't proven enough to get a long-term deal, if Jonathan Taylor hadn't proven enough to get a long-term deal, how the hell is J.K. Dobbins proven enough to get a long-term deal? Back-to-back seasons from a fantasy perspective, running back 33, running back 34. I mean, his best season was this last year, 70 yards per game. Obviously, now he's 2 years removed from the torn ACL, so it should be better this next season. But Alexander Madison, our next guy. I know a lot of people worried about the yards per carry for Alexander Madison. Guys, yards per carry means literally nothing. I understand that when you start playing fantasy football, you think yards per carry is a big deal. It's not. I promise you that. What we want to do is we want to chase usage, volume. With Alexander Madison, the man in the 6 games that Dalvin Cook has missed through his NFL career has averaged about 20 carries per game, has averaged almost 4 receptions per game. If you're looking at the full 17-week split, the pace of Alexander Madison, that would have been good for 332 carries and 65 receptions on a season. Of course, you cannot project that to happen for Alexander Madison this next season. There's no way in hell it will. But regardless, the volume should be there, and historically, he's done well with said volume. Now, our next guy will be Cam Akers. What I'm worried about is this Los Angeles Rams offensive line projects to be a bottom 3 offensive line in the NFL. But with that being said, this is a running back that has finished extremely strong every single year of his NFL career. He looks great in the final 4 weeks. On top of this, he is now 2 years removed from the torn Achilles. To go along with this, the depth chart is barren. You have Cam Akers, Sony Michel, Kyron Williams, and Zach Evans, and Sony Michel just retired. So if you're a believer in him, draft him. I liked him as a prospect. It's just so hard to bet on those guys post-torn Achilles. And now our next guy will be Dalvin Cook. I'm going to be very brief. This is a placement ranking. Obviously, he may move down. He may move up, depending on where he lands. I don't know how I feel about the New York Jets landing spot. I hope he just goes to the Miami Dolphins. If he goes to Miami, he is skyrocketing up these. If he goes to the Jets, I don't know. I could probably stay around this range, maybe go up a tiny bit. Now, our next guy, DeAndre Swift, elite offensive line. Pretty much across any ranking list you look at, they'll have the Philadelphia Eagles as the best offensive line in the NFL. With DeAndre Swift, he has averaged over 5 targets per game over the past 3 seasons. And this is a running back that if he is getting to play in an elite offense behind an elite offensive line, you want to assume that has a lot of touchdown upside. Now, my issue is, historically speaking, with DeAndre Swift, this is not a back that actually sees a considerable amount of usage as a rusher. And we know rushing quarterbacks such as Jalen Hurts typically do not check the ball down at a high rate to the running back out of the backfield. So I don't love the fit with Jalen Hurts, but obviously it's an open depth chart and it's an elite offense. But I think that's all we have for this video. Again, thank you so much. If you watched it, if you enjoyed it, go down there, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you want to check out any of those player props in this video, or if you want to get into a draft with us on the live stream, we are drafting every single day on Underdog Fantasy. You can find that link in the comment section, find it in the description. Use promo code FLOCK. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You'll get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com, and it's available in pretty much every state. You can see all the states here. But thank you so much again, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you, and really hope I get a draft with you in a live stream later tonight.